Yeah. So this is the most profitable way to tap into the wireless space. It's called the disposition, also known as the lump sum buyout. And that's where a property owner is looking at a deal, whether they own it already or they want to sell it or they're looking to buy the deal. Look at the wireless leases not only as monthly rent checks, but also look at it and understand what the value is to sell that lease on its own as a standalone investment. Every property owner has some kind of natural like a subconscious negative reaction to the concept of selling an antenna lease on a property. And it's usually the result of a lack of knowledge, just a lack of understanding of how these deals are structured, what kind of rights they're granting, and how limited this conveyance looks like. So once we explain it and understand, and they also understand where an angle where a third-party company could run an open, fair bid process, a light bulb goes off in their heads.
This is your daily real estate syndication show. I'm your host, Whitney Sewell. Our guest today is going to help you think through the value you may have in your property that you didn't know about. Somebody may approach you wanting to lease a portion of your property, and you may not understand that lease. There could be pros and cons that you are not aware of. Our guest today's name is Meir Waldman. He's the CEO of Nexus Towers, and he is motivated to help owners, reestablish this lease, right? Or reestablish it, but really gain the power back or the negotiations in this lease for a cell phone tower. And your property may have a tower on the top of it or a tower on the land somewhere, or somebody may approach you, like I said, wanting to put one there. And you are probably not familiar with what's in that lease and what it entails for you now, but also for many years to come. He's going to help us with just that today. Meir, welcome to the show. Honored to have you on, and I'm looking forward to learning more about what you do, because I don't think we've talked about this maybe ever on the show. I'm not sure. And I bet there's people that are listening that are going to benefit from learning what you do and how you could help them today. Tell us just that. But before you do, who is Meir? Give us a little more about you, your background, and then let's dive into your specialty.
Hi, sure. Thanks so much for having me on the show. I'll give you a little background of who Meir Waldman is. My background is commercial real estate. I used to do industrial warehouses in New Jersey. So my job was to underwrite deals, to look at memorandums, all types of offerings from brokers, meet with them, tour properties. And then I was representing a group that was investing in these assets. I was managing them as well with a team of managers. I stumbled across a few wireless lease agreements while I was doing that. And whether it was in deals that I was trying to underwrite and better understand a Verizon lease on the top of a warehouse or a ground tower sitting out in the parking lot, I used to ask questions to brokers, attorneys, all types of professionals, and I was getting conflicting answers. I felt like even if people are very savvy in their specific field of where they practice, whether it's traditional tenants occupying buildings or weird tenants like parking cars or taking some extra space for trailers, when it came to this wireless component, I felt that there was more clarity needed. And so approximately 7 years ago, I made this the mission of my life. So as of now, it is all telecom, all wireless. It's a coast-to-coast mission. It's shining light and giving property owners some clarity, understanding exactly what it is, those agreements that they're stumbling upon. And it's not only property owners, obviously brokers. When they take listings, sometimes they want to prepare a nice offer memorandum, understand the little value. They're giving property owners some understanding of what the value of the property is. And they could also stick in some valuations on, we had a conversation with the Nexus rep, and this is what the tower is really worth. It's like, etc. So that's who I am, and that's what I do.
Now, tell us a little bit about your typical client, so the listener can relate. Who is your ideal client and your typical client that you work with?
Yeah, sure. Our typical clients are property owners, landlords, whether they're big or small. Small tenants, small landlords would be like a mom and pop owning a little deli on a corner someplace, and they were approached by a company interested in occupying space on their property for telecom infrastructure purposes. Typically, it would be a rooftop antenna in some cases where there isn't a structure tall enough to serve their business needs, which is provide cell phone coverage for the users that are using cell phones. They're looking to be above timber lines, so where the trees don't really interfere with their signal. So they'll go on top of something tall that's already there. So an existing structure would be like a billboard, a water tower, And if none of those exist in the area, that's where they start pitching to construct a new monopole. And they would have to go through the exercise of getting it approved by planning or zoning, whatever that local jurisdiction would require them to go through those processes. So our typical small property owners, your mom and pop, and the larger property owners are an investor that has a portfolio with properties, whether it's in a region or nationwide. The same business model applies. And the service we provide to our clients is really for them to understand that they also have leverage and they should not be looking at these leases like free money, cherries on top of buildings, that it doesn't matter what lease they sign, free money and just sign away and enjoy it. They don't understand that there is leverage that they should be using, and they should really be careful before they sign, because these lease agreements are like 25-year commitments, if not more. In some cases, they're like 30, or I've seen 50 and 99. So you're basically granting a tenant the rights to do something on the rooftop. True that you had nothing there before. The chimney and the rooftop air conditioning unit weren't paying rent, so this is going to be unique for you. You got a new unit in your apartment building. You thought you had X, and now you have Y, and maybe even Z. So you have 2 or 3 tenants on the rooftop. But make sure you retain your rights. So don't give them a free expansion rights. Build in some nice escalators. These are just financial terms to keep some leverage and have upside for yourself. So even in telecom, hire a specialist to look at that agreement. So that's really the service we provide them. And I could talk a little bit about the disposition, which is once there is a lease agreement in place.
Oh, like before we do this position,
Sure.
Like so I just want to break this down a little further for some of us that have never had a building like this or a cell phone tower right on a building. But if we had that kind of building, you're saying, hey, we may get approached by a company that wants to put a cell phone tower on our property, on our building. And really it's we may see that, like you said, as free money. Well, okay, well, why not? And we sign on the dotted line and not realizing that there may be more to this contract than what we thought, is what you're saying. And I just wanted to kind of dumb it down a little bit so I can understand it.
Sure.
But that's ultimately what you're saying. So it's like if we have the property, somebody approaches us, hey, okay, I'll take a few more dollars a month, right? And maybe you could walk through that process a little bit then. It's like, okay, so, because I wouldn't even know, like, there's somebody like you out there, right?
Yeah.
And so, but I would hopefully find somebody like yourself to help me that knows that process, right?
Yeah.
Or knows if I'm getting taken advantage of or not. And what does that process look like a little bit?
Sure. Happy to walk you through. So I'll just give you an example, like a case study, and then we'll explain what the service, what it would look like if it were different. So let's talk about a lease that I looked at recently. A guy in Utah signed on a dotted line 20 years ago, and he granted a telecom company the rights to erect a nice monopole on his property for $100 a month with no escalators ever. So it's just flat $100 per month. You know, back then $100 was something, and they have rights that are still running out, not for too much longer. So I think within the next 10 years, it all expires. But let's talk about the business that this tower company was running on his property. They have a nice fenced-in area, 100 feet by 100 feet. They're hosting 3 subtenants on that tower. They're making a killing every month. So it's you have a ground lease for almost nothing, and they're collecting more than $15,000 a month from the subtenants on that tower. Little did he know that he was able to, even if he accepted the $100 a month, he could have negotiated, I want 10% or 15% of any future tenant that you put up after the first tenant. And then he would have some kind of nice business running there with escalators from that subtenant or something like that. There's always like a little angle. Or maybe he should have not given 100 by 100. He could have just given them a small compound, and then upon expansion is where he could have gotten a little bit tougher on negotiation, because once they're committed to the site, they'll pay whatever it takes to try to accommodate more ground space for more ground equipment to host another subtenant. So things like that your typical property owner has no clue that these angles exist. And also the typical property owner has a little fear of, if I play too tough, they're going to go to my neighbor because it's ground that they need. And so they're looking for the nicest landlord, someone that's really going to be nice to them. And if they see my true colors right now, even before we sign the lease, they'll say, this guy is too tough for us. We're not going to, they're always afraid that you're going to sell the property to a tough guy. But if they have granted rights, anyone could take them to court and no one's going to win them. So they're looking to get a nice little agreement in place to give them some business rights for the long term. And they're also looking for people that aren't that savvy. So we're not looking to disrupt any industry here. We're just looking to level the playing field. So understand the industry fear terms that companies are paying, and just empower property owners and tell them, look, you shouldn't sign for $800 a month. Try $1,800, and don't give it to them for 3 or 4% every 5 years. Go for 10% every 5 years. Just try to bring it in line and go for 10% of a subtenant, things like that. So,
what are some of the most, I guess, the types of properties that are most likely to be used for a cell tower? I was just thinking, I don't know, or maybe you can highlight the types of properties, and then would it be beneficial for an owner like that, if they have a type of property you're fixing to talk about, to even pursue a company to put a cell phone tower up there? Maybe, types of properties, and then should they pursue somebody like this?
Yeah, types of properties, interesting. I don't know why, but I've seen so many self-storage facilities hosting a tower. I'm not sure why. So that's just some coincidence. But as you start looking, you'll see them. But after self-storage, I would say it's everywhere. It's not. There's no difference which asset class. Mobile home park. It could be a multifamily garden style. It could be a mid-rise, high-rise. You can see them on hotels. You can even see them on school property. So they're everywhere. And really, it's driven by something called a search ring. Search rings are put out by the engineering department from these companies. So let's say I use Verizon for my provider on my personal cell phone. I'm not sure who you use, but everyone has a company that's trying very hard to win competition. So let's say T-Mobile is aggressively pursuing a marketing campaign nationwide, and they're bragging about the strongest 5G network nationwide. And in order to deliver on that promise, they actually have engineers monitoring their calls. So they have a few different buckets of zip codes that they know they have some trouble going on. They have dropped calls. They have people calling in to boot their number over to a different provider. They know they have a problem there. So those things trigger something. Engineers take a look at the zone, and they say, hey, we have poor coverage right there. We need a new tower. And that will trigger the leasing folks to go out there and try to find a property owner willing to grant space. So it doesn't matter. It could be a hotel, it could be a shopping center, and it could be an apartment building. They might even option all three. And they'll approach 3 property owners, option them, and take them in front of a planning board and say, look, we need a tower up here. We're losing service. And the planning board might be well aware. Usually it's residents living there. They say, yeah, you guys have terrible coverage here. Please put something up here. So the hotel and the other one, all 3 might get it. One of the 3 might get it. So it doesn't really matter. I mentioned earlier about the timber line trying to be somewhere at a specific height. So if someone has an existing structure with some height, there's some advantage to that because you're saving the money of erecting a pole. You're talking about $350,000 in savings or more, depending on what the dynamics are, how tall the trees are, and what kind of loads they're looking to put there. Like I have this guy is a lattice tower. So it's a little model from a brass lattice tower. So this is one tenant. And then you have, these are like point-to-point microwave antennas. But then you can have loaded towers with 3 tenants, 4 tenants. So you start getting into a monopole, heavier concrete, and construction costs go up from there. So when someone has a nice structure, like a water tower on top of a building, or just a mid-rise, even if it's just 5, 6 stories or less. I've seen it on 2 stories. I've even seen it on a small garage near a gas station, 1 story with antennas. So it's all engineering. It could be there's a highway nearby with traffic passing. It could be a parking lot to a shopping center with many customers coming there. Demand equals supply. So they need to supply frequency coverage wherever they have a demand.
What's the future of this kind of business, or of cell phone towers, things like that, or 5G versus 4G or 10G or whatever it may be?
So this little guy here is a 5G. There's a mini pole. The mini is like on a street light, and you'll see these things. So for old legacy 4G, or even if they upgraded that to 5G, for the old poles, they're paying a killing. They're paying big rent. For the smaller stuff, I've seen very cheap leases, like a few $100s a year. So the whole model is evolving now. 5G and the next gen technology isn't replacing the old. It's more like fill-in, just because of the overwhelmed demand. People streaming on their devices, podcasts like this, and so there's an overwhelming demand in the network of trying to supply and keep up with the game. Metaverse and things like that aren't going to help. They're only going to continue to overload the network. So they're looking for alternative methods of deploying more cell sites for cheaper rents. The mini cell site doesn't have any ground equipment. They'll tap into the fiber lines running in the right of way. directly. So there'll be a little nod, an antenna on top of a pole or any utility pole going straight into fiber, and then ultimately the equipment sits in data centers. So there's the wireless network has an overwhelming amount of wires running beneath us, under the sea, connecting continents. There's a lot going on. The myth of satellite is also something that's soon not going to be such a myth. It's reality. If you read up or watch things about Starlink and different projects that different companies are running, it's real. They're testing it on different, like Ukraine, when they had crisis, they tapped into a full satellite network. So there's different angles of the future. If you want to know where the future is going to go, I'll humbly say I have no clue how the future is going to look. And we'll live and learn. It's been exciting up until here.
I use Starlink at home, so I'm thankful for it. That's all I can get. I'm not there now, but I just mean and it works. It works well. So grateful. I'm grateful for it. I can't get another provider anyway out there. But you talked about the stoplight or street lights, and of course, me thinking, okay, well, I'm not going to own too much real estate where there's many street lights, right? I was thinking about how to position myself for this future growth, right? but that's going to be mostly city governments, right? That's going to own, right? They're going to own the streets and the sidewalks and that type of thing. But I was just thinking about our real estate owners may not be able to capitalize as much on a cell phone tower on their building in the future, right? Or if it goes, if that keeps growing on street light type.
Yeah. So they're growing side by side. Like whenever I drive, obviously, like the person that deals with shoes only sees shoes wherever he walks. I see cell phone towers and street lights, so it's dangerous. I got to be careful when I drive. But I see them. And I was driving into New York City just a week ago, and I was passing a city in New Jersey, and I was spotting them everywhere. These street lights are just happening. So for now, they're still building both. They're building rooftops, they're building towers, and they're building street lights because the network's overwhelming and exploding. There's others, like the cable companies are proposing antennas hanging from the wires, from the cables. They look like Wi-Fi routers, real small and harmless, and it's another network. Layers and layers of different frequency. I'm not an engineer. I could repeat things that I hear and know, but I don't exactly understand what I'm saying. There's different, different frequencies, obviously, and different types of networks. So even with the Bitcoin thing, it's a little confusing, but there's a whole blockchain type of idea where they have everyone hosting a small antenna that will send signals from one to another, known as IoT, Internet of Things, whatever. So and it's not for all signals, on not all frequencies, only smaller devices. I'm approached by companies trying to do different things, and they contact me through LinkedIn and on different channels, trying to get my attention and understand a little bit what we do and how we could collaborate and introduce it. Because it is technology and technology evolves, and we have to remain focused and understand what it is, our service that we provide. Future is exciting, but today is even more exciting because there's opportunity. There's people that are signing on dotted lines without understanding what they're doing. So as much as you want to stand on the mountaintops and on the building tops and make a loud announcement nationwide to the landlords to just stop signing, don't do anything not smart. Our mission isn't accomplished. There's still so much for us to do. So the future, we'll see what happens.
Well, Meir, what else, does the real estate investor need to know about cell phone tower leasing and their property that I haven't asked you, and probably wouldn't even know to ask you because I've not dealt with this personally.
Yeah. So this is the most profitable way to tap into the wireless space. It's called the disposition, also known as the lump sum buyout. And that's where a property owner is looking at a deal, whether they own it already or they want to sell it or they're looking to buy the deal. Look at the wireless leases not only as monthly rent checks, but also look at it and understand what the value is to sell that lease on its own as a standalone investment. Every property owner has some kind of natural, like a subconscious negative reaction to the concept of selling an antenna lease on a property. And it's usually the result of a lack of knowledge, just a lack of understanding of how these deals are structured, what kind of rights they're granting, and how limited this conveyance looks like. So once we explain it and understand, and they also understand where an angle where a third-party company could run an open, fair bid process, a light bulb goes off in their heads. So if I went too quick, you could push me back a little and stop me, and I'll dumb it down and explain a little bit. I could give you a case study, but please stop me if you want.
Yeah, maybe a quick case study would be good. That might help us all to understand.
Sure. So recently we sold, I'll give you an example, a certain portfolio for a family-owned business. So they have apartment buildings in a major city in the United States, and they hold on to their buildings. They very rarely sell. So they have a huge portfolio of buildings. They had a handsome amount of antennas scattered over different building rooftops. And they never really had anyone on staff that understood what it takes to really take advantage of these leases. But I have to say they did pretty well. They had some people on staff. It wasn't their job, but they just got a kick out of it. And whenever they got notice from a tenant that they're interested in doing something on the rooftop, they took advantage of their some people have it naturally, and they just push back, and the companies would say, no, we need to do this. What would it take for us to do it? And they'd say, well, extra money. And they say, okay, good. Here's an amendment. We'll sign another $1,000 a month. Is that okay? Great. Second amendment, third amendment. They had a nice amount of leases with nice amendments, always growing and growing. But they never understood what it is truly worth, like on one check. Because it was after a period of time with vacancies and COVID and all the exciting things that really did some damage to landlords in major cities, especially where they had major laws that they had to comply with, like evicting and stuff. So this landlord was really trying to recover. And then when Nexus approached him and explained to him that, yeah, you've been pushing away all these unsolicited offers. I get it. You didn't understand what it's worth, but let's do this. I'll do a back of the napkin evaluation. So what we do is we have underwriters on our team. So what we do is we would analyze the lease agreements. Typically, landlords don't have a complete file, like they're missing some amendments. They never really reconciled their rents and matched up all the equipment and seen if the tenant escalated fairly and things like that. Once we have a full package, we're able to give them some evaluations, but more importantly, if they're interested, we could run an open bid process with all these investors that are interested in buying. There are some very, very good companies out there that have a good business model. And in essence, the attraction is money up front. So in this case, we did a beautiful deal for these people. They cashed out money that they never thought it's worth. You're talking about nice, handsome money. And then in addition to the money, there's also the management component. No longer do any one of their staff members need to become creative in shooting in the dark and trying to negotiate, making decisions whether or not to grant access to rooftops and things like that, or signing permits for modifications. From now on, anything rooftop related, there's a one-stop shop company, very well-funded and organized company. That's their rooftop go-to company. They're managing their agreements in place. Any new tenants that come on, they have a revenue share model built into the deal where they're still going to benefit on residual if a new tenant comes onto a site. They can then further sell that. They hired an attorney that specializes in telecom. We recommended one, a guy that's practicing telecom law for more than 25 years. So being that he was involved in the deal and representing their rights, this attorney was able to explain to them the legal, all their different protections and remedies to satisfy, and also work with their lender to work out like a SNDA, a subordination and non-disturbance agreement. So it was released from the collateral. In that case, it was a relationship lender. It wasn't a problem. If it were some kind of other lender, like a agency, any federal type of backed loan, it gets a little bit more goofy. In some cases, it's a no-go. It's like a non-starter. You're not able to sell it if it's part of the collateral with a federal type of loan. But luckily, many landlords are in a position to sell, and that's our target audience. Those are the people that are really benefiting. So this is your little case study of an example where a landlord didn't understand that he has serious money hanging over rooftops, was scrambling for cash to make certain payments to certain partners and different structures that they have in place, and it let him sleep again at night, like literally allowed him to start taking deep breaths once again. So
just so often, like we don't know the value of something that we have or have opportunity in, right? And I think too, it goes back to finding somebody like yourself, but often like I wouldn't even know there's somebody like you out there, right? So you and that's why you need to be on podcasts like this, right, Meir? But it's so people can even understand that, hey, that this is a thing, and that there are experts out there that can help you to proper analyze something like that, that knows what they're talking about. Because I wouldn't know, right? Otherwise, that's a good case study or a good way to, I don't know, just think about that. Yeah. I was thinking too, if a lease is that long, I mean, wow, right? I could see why, as a property's passed down from owner to owner to owner, or, years down the road, you might inherit something like that or buy something like that and not really have known the value even in something that you got, right? Many years later.
Yeah. It's interesting as much as the lease has protections, like it has 20 years left on the lease. So it sounds like a cool protected asset. And why would I sell it? I mean, it's great. It's a credit tenant and it's 20 years to go. When you read the lease agreement, tenants always reserve the rights to terminate with a 30-day notice. But that's a little caveat. And I've had many cases where property owners told me, not my lease. And I said, here, Meir at nexustowers.com. Send it over to me, email it. I'll take a look at it and I'll point it out to you. In one case, I would say I found some language where the tenant actually granted some real securities, but it was an exchange of a massive haircut. And I didn't talk about it here yet, but the tenants have an ongoing, like a massive project to try to lower their overhead and asking property owners for rent reductions. So wherever they started paying too much money, like at least started 20 years ago, 5% annual escalators, they're paying $7,500 a month now. So all these leases are thrown into a bucket where they give it to third-party vendors, and they just use simple tactics of telling the property owner, look, this thing is, it's under review. We're not going to continue at this rate. We're already in talks with 5 alternative sites neighboring your property. For us to move this thing is not a big deal, but we would love to continue the relationship. $1,800 is what we're pursuing. That's their proposal. Anything above that is something we won't be able to continue. So in that case, the property owner said, well, $1,800 is crazy. Like $7,000 is what I'm getting now. Why would I do something this crazy? They said, well, your alternative is 0. Which one's better? So the property owner said, let me think about it. Call me back in a half a year. And then ultimately you can't push it off anymore. And then he said, you know what? If you give me protections, like 5-year guaranteed rents, I'll do it. And they gave it to him. So that's the one time I've seen a lease with a 60-month guarantee period. For them, the payout of 1,700 times whatever wasn't bad. They got a 2.5% escalator instead of 5. They got 1,700 instead of 7,000. It was a home run for that company. So it was an AT&T lease, and a different company did the game on their behalf, and that company gets paid a commission, whatever they're successful in doing. So that's another reason why companies should know about, someone like Nexus that could actually step in and help them. Because this seller, for example, had the ability to sell this lease at $7,000 a month and cash out some wild number, something in the range of a 5 cap is really what you could sell these leases. So it's real money. After you discount it to $1,700, they gave a beautiful present to no one. I mean, they literally gave their tenants a real present. With a little calculator, because you're looking at hundreds of thousands of dollars. Yeah.
All right, Mayor, we're going to have to switch to a few final questions in the show. But I think you've opened my eyes quite a bit to this possibility of towers, cell phone towers, and at least having somebody to call when that situation arises, right? For sure. But what are some of the most important metrics that you track? It could be personally or professionally.
Honesty. Honesty is a metric. I mean, it's more of a belief, and it's a core, it's a value, it's your essence. But I think that's the most important metric. And if you score 100 on that, you're in business, you're in life, you're good. If you score anything less than 100, you need some improvement. So I think that's the most important metric, and that's what puts us on the map. You have to remember, it's not only in business; it's a lifestyle that I run, and I aspire to remain at 100. But in this specific industry, if I want to say that who we are and what kind of service we provide, and attract a certain amount of a certain type of team member, it's that kind of environment where property owners need to understand that there's some fresh air, and these are people that are honest. So that's my metric.
What about any other habits that you have that have produced a high return for you?
Mentorship, listening to others and mentoring others. So really, I think mentoring others is what I've personally been more blessed in being part of. I wish I would have more mentors. I mean, the little that I did take advantage of listening to professionals, people that have been through challenges and how they overcame them and which different types of different things are out there, resources to be more successful. That's an amazing thing. So, and then mentoring others is something that the reward is not even tenfold. It's you can't even put a number on that. It's huge.
Wow, for sure. Yeah, mentorship is crucial. I appreciate you bringing that up, or as a habit too. How do you like to give back? Mentorship may be one of those, but any other ways?
Giving back is I'll say something funny, but it's not so funny. When you think you're giving back, you should really reconsider that thought. You're not actually giving back, you're passing along, you're passing on. Because when you think you're giving back, it's as if you had it and you gave it away. If you never, it doesn't even click on you. If you got an abundance, you should just pass it on. You don't even give it back. So it doesn't even hit you, it doesn't stick to you. If you're not understanding what I'm saying, I look at giving back as a way to actually try to stay humble and don't inhale the abundance. So if you have access to a lot, pass it on, whether it's charity or mentorship or sincerely helping others, but more importantly, by remaining humble. So that's if I answered your question.
Love that thought process. If you never considered it yours in the first place, right? It's easier to give away too.
Yep.
Yeah. Meir, well, great to meet you and have you on the show. I think that I think this would be something that most people haven't heard of, right? Or didn't know that there's experts out there like yourself. But I bet that there's many of them who in their career will encounter a tower around their building, on their property, or on their building, or something like that, or somebody approaching them, right, wanting to do that. And so I hope that then they'll remember, hey, I remember this guy, Meir, that, and they'll reach out because, I would want to find somebody like yourself. And how can they do that? How can they find you, and learn more about you?
Sure. So they can find me online. So nexustowers.com, and my email address is on the website. In addition to that, we're based out of Lakewood, New Jersey, and on the East Coast of the United States. And I say you should be careful when you drive. Once you start seeing cell towers, you'll see them everywhere. So just stay focused in your lane. But yeah, they're everywhere. Wherever your cell phone's working, there's a tower peeking out somewhere from the trees.
Thank you for listening to the Real Estate Syndication Show, brought to you by LifeBridge Capital. LifeBridge Capital works with investors nationwide to invest in real estate, while also donating 50% of its profits to assist parents who are committing to adoption. LifeBridge Capital, making a difference, one investor and one child at a time. Connect online at www.lifebridgecapital.com for free material and videos to further your success.